Hello, my name is Amanda Kinney. I'm an 8th grade math intervention teacher at Texas Middle School. I am presenting Chapter 15, Response to Intervention, a school model. Our objectives today, we will discover the history and legislation of RTI. We will identify the 3 tiers of RTI. We will discuss the implementation of RTI, and we will discuss the principal's role in RTI. We will first look at the historical and legislative perspective of RTI. The passage of the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2003 created an environment in which RTI has been identified as a plausible approach to special education eligibility. Working together, the two lay the groundwork for the implementation of RTI at the campus and district level and is a first step in determining whether a student can qualify for special education services. RTI, or Response to Intervention, is a multi-tiered system that focuses on the early intervention to prevent school failure in students. RTI is a general education initiative that brings all students the opportunity for high-quality intervention that is closely monitored and reported on. There are 3 tiers to RTI. The first tier, Tier 1, is the instruction and services provided for all students. If a student is not successful at this level, they are considered for the next tier, and usually 80% of your students will stay at Tier 1. Tier 2 is a targeted short-term instruction that is intended for about 15% of the population. Students who do not adequately perform at Tier 2 are then moved into the next tier system. Tier 3 is the most intensive level of instruction and is generally about 5% of your student population. If a student does not respond well at this level, once they have gotten to Tier 3, they are then considered maybe that they need more intensive help, and this intensive help would then be serviced maybe through special education services. The essential elements and principles of the RTI system are very much a model of how we typically see the school system today. The elements of RTI are student outcome measures, high quality instruction and intervention, progress monitoring, informative assessment, and data-based decision making. These elements are, even though they are intended and were created for RTI specifically, we tend to see in today with practices and interventions that have been just implemented at the school-wide level that these elements are very important for making decisions for all students, not just for students that require special education services, but it is a very key point to the RTI system. There are several principles that are related to the RTI system that are very much able to be implemented in the regular classroom, not just in an RTI system. And the biggest principles that really stuck out to me were that all children can be taught and learn. Just all students might learn differently and might learn at different paces and different levels. Intervention must occur early. The longer that you allow students to go without intervention, the harder it is to get them back on track. Services are best delivered in several different tiers, which is what the RTI system was intended to do. You start at Tier 3 or Tier 1. If a student's not successful at Tier 1, then you move them into Tier 2. If they are still not successful, you move them into Tier 3. And if those services are still not meeting the student's needs, that is when it is typically put to a determination of eligibility for special education for those few students that don't that are not successful at the Tier 3 level. There are 3 different types of RTI models. The first is the standard protocol RTI. This is aimed at remediating a student's specific skill deficit, often used because it is a more specific design and has more specific and prescriptive interventions. Problem-solving RTI is a collaborative effort, not concerned with the eligibility determination. It's not primarily concerned with the eligibility determination for SAID, but student performance data is gathered and analyzed to develop reasons for the student's problems and then to determine the appropriate evidence or research-based strategies that can be used to remedy those shortcomings for the students. School-wide RTI is a combination of standard protocol and problem-solving RTI models integrated into an overall system of communication and decision-making. The school-wide RTI model is typically what we see today, as it combines both the standard and the problem-solving models into one entity. To implement an RTI system at any school, the first thing that you have to do is help the staff to learn the premise of RTI, what it means, how it's going to help the students, how it is going to affect the teachers. You kind of need to build a teacher buy-in for the need for implementation of RTI at the campus level. The next thing that you would do is select the appropriate model, whether it be the protocol model, the problem-solving model, or the school-wide model of RTI. After you have determined the model that you are going to use, the next thing you would do is provide professional development, training for all those directly involved with delivering the RTI intervention and assessments at the school. After training, you develop an appropriate assessment and data collection process. Who is going to do this? Who's going to create the assessments? Who's going to determine the timetable for the assessments to happen? The data collection process, because a major part of the RTI system is the growth measures of students over a period of time, and then that leads to the last step, where you develop a realistic multi-year timetable to determine how well your RTI is working, how well the implementation is happening. It's not just a one-year fix, it's over a multiple years, and how you're going to determine the success or failure of your RTI implementation. And lastly, we have the principal's role in RTI, and it pretty much comes down to providing direction for your teachers, exercising the influence that you have over professional staff at your school. You also need to collaborate with your teachers to determine the best practices, best research, how you're going to implement, how you're going to create the interventions that you're going to start implementing. And you also have to promote and sustain the process. That is probably the biggest out of the interviews that I did with the principals and the curriculum directors and the special populations director that I interviewed over the last few weeks. It's not necessarily creating the buy-in up front, because that's kind of easy, creating the buy-in up front, but with turnover rates and with a prolonged process, maintaining the teacher buy-in and maintaining the importance of the process kind of is where the challenge becomes, and making sure that you not only create the buy-in up front, but that you promote it and sustain it as the process is happening is a very key part of RTI. And I'm going to close with saying that this chapter, really, I picked this chapter because I am the intervention math teacher in the 8th grade at Texas Middle School, and it wasn't until I read this chapter and really started researching beyond the chapter how important RTI is and what my position really is at my school. It gives me going into my next year, it kind of gives me a different avenue at which I'm going to approach it. But then as I look at being a future administrator, understanding the importance of the RTI framework as a whole, I didn't really understand that until I read this chapter, and that's kind of what this chapter has done for me, and I hope it has done the same for you, and thank you very much. Have a great day.